and welcome, beloveds, to the Dr. Mumbi Show. My name is Dr.MumbiSeraki. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you're moving into living life truly on your own terms. Thanks to every single person that, reaches out to us with different stories from your region. Always feel free to get in touch. Dr. Mumbi at drmumbishow.com. There's a lot happening across the African continent. But today we're looking at global Black Africa. And it turns out that racism is expensive, is expensive business, literally. The cost of racism, according to a recent study, allegedly the divided states economy lost 16 trillion because of discrimination, says the Citigroup Bank, and they said this was 13 trillion was lost in potential business revenue because of discriminatory lending to African American entrepreneurs, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. They say 2.7 trillion in income lost because of disparities in wages suffered by African Americans who are paid less than their Mzungu counterparts. $218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit. There was a very disturbing story that came out of the divided states that showed that a lot of these, suburbia houses that were built in the 60s, 50s and 60s and 70s, and even till today, were literally had a clause in them where you could only resell to a Mzungu. It had to be a Mzungu neighborhood, and Mzungus got the best loans. And this disproportionately affected our African American brothers and sisters, because those houses that they were buying with all kinds of, helps and grants, etc., at maybe $20,000 or $30,000 back then, are now worth $200 or $300 today. And that makes a big difference in just how you can, generational wealth, etc., etc. So, the Citigroup is actually urging, a bevy of actions to reverse discriminatory practices just for money's sake, and boost the gross domestic GDP, gross domestic product. And they're saying if the divided states, acknowledges and works in reversing some of these discriminatory measures, the economy could get a boost of $5 trillion in the next 5 years. Let's not forget the GDP of the divided states is about 19 trillion, but still $5 trillion, that would make a significant difference. That's like the GDP of several African countries, like maybe the East African region or something. No joke. And it's interesting to see that such, reports are coming out. The vice chairman of the Citigroup Bank, he said, we believe we have a responsibility to address current events and to frame them with an economic lens in order to highlight the real cause of a long-standing discrimination against minority groups, especially against Black people, and particularly in the U.S. Wow. It's a new day. It's a new day for the global Black, nation. And we also saw even Trump has released some magic bullet package for the African American community ahead of the elections in November. But a lot of the scholars, from our community have come out and they've said it has the same language and jargon of all the others, where they allow minority groups. And that word minority groups means, women and all other Hispanics, etc., can benefit from that. So it's not really the reparations that they're looking for. But very interesting that the divided states has lost $19 trillion since the year 2000 in just 2 decades because of its racist outlook and its racist practices. Will this change the way Babylon operates, or is it just a little too late for Babylon? We'll keep an eye out. Until next time, tuko pamoja.
When we look around and we see today in our politics a rich white man telling working class white people that their problem is brown people, we need to understand the historical pedigree of that. That is symbolic of the entire history of race and class politics in America. the history of rich white people telling working class and poor white people that their problem are black and brown people. So beginning in the 1600s, that is what happens. Prior to about 1670 or so, there was no such thing as the white race, at least not recognized as such, called as such. That is not what people of European descent were when they were in Europe. They were English, they were Irish, they were Scottish, they were whatever they were. They were not white. Only in the colonies do we become white, and for a very specific reason, because in those early years of the colonial period, where you had white indentured servants, one level above enslaved themselves, and you had African-descended folks, some of them enslaved for life, others indentured servants also in the earliest years of the colonies, those people would often see their interests as being common. They all realized that they were being screwed over by the same landowners, the same elite. They fomented various rebellions, like Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, others as well. And as a result, the elite in the colonies realized that they had to figure out a way to get the other folks from Europe on their team. So they created this mentality that said, you're now a member of the white race. You're on our team. You're wearing our uniform. Now you're at the end of the bench. You may not get in the game, but you're on our team, you see. So then they start putting white folks, now called, on the slave patrols, right? Didn't really give them any land or any real power except the power to control people of color, which is why folks of color say, and they are right, that modern policing traces to the system of slave patrols and slavery. And we have to be clear on that because that's the history, right? So whiteness was created to divide and conquer, to create the notion that even though you might not have much, at least you're not black, at least you're not indigenous, at least you're not Mexican, at least you're not Chinese working on the railroads to build the transcontinental economy. You may not have much, but at least you have, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the psychological wage of whiteness. And it's a trick that was played during the Civil War era on my people in the South, right? Rich folk, landowners in the South telling poor white folks who didn't own anything that they got to go out and fight to preserve the rich man's property in human beings. Fascinating. Why would you do that? Why would I go fight for your property? Well, because you told me that if I don't, these slaves are going to take my job. No, fool, they got your job. That's the point. If you got to charge $1 a day and you can make them work for free because you own them, guess who got the gig, Jack? Not you. So in fact, the system of enslavement was in the long run against the class interest of working class white folks, but they got suckered. Same thing happened in the union movement. You had white labor union folks who didn't want black and brown bodies in their union because it would reduce the professionalism of the craft. No, fool, it'll double the size of your union. And then when you go out on strike, they can't replace your happy ass with the brown folk that you didn't want next to you in the first place. Because when they do replace you with them, then you will blame them, not the elite. See how that works? It's a trick. And it has worked for hundreds of years. It is working on some folk right now. And it is our job to resist that with every fiber of our being.